On this episode of the Friend to Friend podcast, I invited one of my greatest and dearest friends, Allison Pumilia, to jump on. When I think about this idea of finding connection and inspiring change, Allison is the first one that comes to mind. Her life is just so incredibly beautiful, and when I became friends with her, it was nuts because our life experiences were so wildly different. But what happened was we expanded each other's perspective of God's kingdom and of serving and loving humanity. And it became like this giant adventure together that we were on, just exploring the extravagant dimensions of God's love. Allison lives her life with a zeal for God. She lives with this childlike faith. She's willing to say yes to anything and everything that comes her way that He sends her. And it is amazing. It's so inspiring. So I know you guys are going to love this episode. Hey everybody, welcome to the Friend to Friend podcast. I'm Tori Townley, and today I have one of my very best friends in the whole world, Allison Pumilia.
Hey.
Is it Pumilia or Pumilia?
Honestly, it's a debate in our house.
Okay, cool.
So
yeah. Either or.
Either or.
That's so funny. So I've known Allison for, I think it's like 13, 14
That sounds
years.
about right. Mm-hmm.
We've been like best buds, deep, but like an unlikely kind of friendship.
Yes.
Which looking at us, you wouldn't think that. But deep down, but the reason that I asked Allison to come on today is because when I think of this concept of find connection, inspire change, I can think of no one more exemplary of what that means in my life than you.
Oh,
yeah.
That's sweet.
So today, I want to talk about like just the dynamics of having that connection and what it is like to have someone in your life who inspires you to like seriously see the world differently and make a difference. But before that, tell us a little about you, like your family and what you're all about.
Let's see. My name is Allison. I've been married to Chris for 10 years. We adopted Elijah 4 years ago as an infant, and then we struggled with infertility as a family, and then finally had our daughter Selah. She's about to be 2.
She's so cute.
And so our family dynamic is different, but I love them, and I'm just a mom, kind of, you know?
Just a mom. No, you're not. You're running a podcast, which plug, Tough Stuff Podcast is the best.
My husband and I mean, we love Jesus. We love people. And so I think we both have been through really hard things. And so, you know, a few months ago it was on our heart to make a podcast where we talk about hard things and tough stuff. And so it's kind of this outlet where we can share stories and interview people and hear their stories. And it's really been like a passion project for us.
It's so good too. Like y'all's heart, you and Chris, y'all both have such a heart for humanity and people. Chris runs outreach at Healing Place.
He's the men's pastor.
Y'all have always been like deep in serving and loving people. And if there's anybody in this world who is like a fan of people's testimonies and their stories and seeing beauty in it, it's you.
Yes.
And I love that you just like, you did this out of obedience, like on a whim.
Yeah, well, when God moves in your life in a significant way, it's really hard to ignore that in someone else's life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you can see it because it's like ingrained in you. It's like an echo.
Yes.
Deep calls to
It's
deep.
familiar.
Yeah. I love that. So I want to like jump into a little bit of when I first met you, like our friendship story, which let's go Drew Barrymore, get real deep and cuddly. No, I'm kidding. So I met you at a small group. I can still remember like we were standing by the bathroom, waiting on the bathroom.
I remember that.
And we just clicked and like we just were like getting coffee the next day, and you were like, I want to hear your story. I was like, I don't have one.
I was new to the church.
Yeah, you came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was a newbie.
Yeah, and you were just like, I feel like you were asking for people's stories. Like that was what you wanted to hear. But we just clicked, and I remember being so blown away by the openness and the vulnerability from day one. Like the first time we ever had coffee, you're like airing out your dirty laundry, telling me everything you've ever done. And you're like, and now I love Jesus. And I remember feeling like I had seen a new dimension of who God is,
Mm.
because you let me see how he illuminated like those dark parts of your life and brought hope.
Mm.
And then you in return, you like saw me too, which, given, for those who don't know, like I grew up, obviously parents are involved in missions, my grandparents are missionaries, I grew up in church, I was homeschooled, like never did anything wild. Even though I really wanted to do some wild stuff, I just couldn't. I loved Jesus and that was it. But I felt discredited for a long time, where people were like, you just don't get it. You've never been in the world. And I was like, but what do I do? Like, am I supposed to go?
Do I need to go?
I'm just here to love people and Jesus. I don't know. But you like let me be part of.
Well, I think you had things that I needed and wanted, you know, like you had that level of purity that I had never seen.
Wow.
And so, you know, I think that is what drew me to you as a friend, was like, okay, you know, I just came from this crazy lifestyle and met Jesus and he changed my life. And now what? And you were like at the bathroom door in the small group, you know what I mean?
This way.
And so I think, you know, you were something that I wanted to be like. You inspired me as a new Christian, because I didn't know how to read the word. I didn't know how to talk to God or hear from God, you know? And so those were things that you grew up learning. And so, you know, I was drawn to that as a friend, you know? And I think too, when you get out of, you know, a toxic lifestyle, or, you know, you get saved, you kind of don't care what anybody thinks anymore. You know what I mean? Because it was kind of like, if God can, you know, set me free from all those things, then I don't care what you think about me. You know what I mean? And so I think I was just so on fire for God at that time, and ready and willing to share what he had done in my life. And so, you know, I married a man that also had a very radical, you know, life with God. And so that's kind of just how we are, I guess.
It's so cool. And that's just how you have just been so wide open with everything from day one. And we always laugh because I gave my heart to Jesus when I was like 3 on a pink couch with my dad. And that was my salvation moment. But when I met you, I felt like I got to sit in on the entire process of like what salvation really, that radical, dramatic. Yes. I got to like experience that firsthand with you. You processed everything with me. Yes. You were like every milestone. And it was like you gave me this pair of glasses and you're like, don't you see? And I was like, oh, like I've grown up in church and like I've been surrounded by like, I'm doing outreaches every day. I'm in missions. Like I see it. But the way you came in with that child, like it was just this brand new, everything was so beautiful to you. Yes. I fell in love with humanity again. Yes. I had my own salvation moment vicariously through you.
Yeah, but I have to speak to your level of like safety as a friend. Like you were easy to talk to. You know what I mean? Like it would be different if you were standoffish or, you know, judgmental or, you know, anything like that. But you were so easy to open up to as a new Christian. You were curious about the things that I was walking through. And I think what that did was it added value to me and empowered me to keep sharing, you know? So cool. And so it's almost like God allowed us each to share in each other's perspectives.
That's
you know what I mean?
Good. Yeah.
Like I had a different vantage point of God than you. God had God reached into the depths of the ocean and pulled me out, and you know, God kept you out from the ocean, and our vantage points are very different.
That's cool.
And so I just remember feeling comfortable opening up to you. And so I know you say I was very vulnerable and all that, but I have to speak to your safety as a friend.
Wow. Thanks, dude. No, I think that's so cool because we both had to set aside our insecurities a little bit. Like I said, I've always felt like, oh, I shouldn't speak to people who have been in rough places because they'll just be mad. Like, what do you know? But I had to be like, I'm just gonna genuinely, I want to see the face of God in you.
Yeah.
And you also were like, you took a risk by just opening up everything to me on day one. We had to put aside like that pride and that insecurity because I think God designs us to have not deficiencies, but like to need each other.
Yes.
And to meet each other, like in theory, on paper, we wouldn't have had anything to give each other.
Right.
But look at
God
how
did.
much, because, okay, so you gave your heart to Jesus, you joined School of Ministry, you interned with me in outreach, which is so funny.
You were my boss.
Yeah, that's not really how it was, but, and I just remember you flipped the script on like, not flip the script, but like reawakened, Tori, this is an adventure. Like every day, we were going the second mile. We weren't just running a food pantry. We weren't just like showing up on a Saturday, but it was like, okay, we're staying after hours. We're falling in love with people.
Yes.
We ended up at some weird places. Like just talk about that season for a little bit, because this whole thing about find connection, we found connection, and then there was just like, it was like we were playing ping pong constantly of just like, did you notice that? Did you notice this? Did you notice that? Let's try this. Let's try that.
Well, I think you've always embodied like this childlike wonder and awe spirit about you.
That's
yes.
you.
Well, especially back then, you were very like every time we would have conversations where I would be processing, what God was doing or I thought God was doing, you always had this like whimsical thought about, what he was doing. And that was intriguing to me because it gave me verbiage or language that I didn't have. And so,
That's cool.
I think I felt like I mattered. And so then that made me want to make other people feel like they mattered.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so we started this lifestyle of making people feel mattered. Wait, no, that's not how you say it.
I feel like they matter.
Making people feel like
that.
they matter. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it became a lifestyle, and we found ourselves, on nursing home outreaches and, shooting Nerf guns with nursing home residents.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
And what's so interesting about that season is the level of joy that brought me was far greater than what I think the joy was that we brought others.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
We ended up Miss Virginia's house.
Oh my
We met this
gosh.
old lady.
Accidentally.
And just kept her company for a couple years.
We adopted her.
We adopted her.
And that was not on our task list.
No.
That was not like an outreach assignment.
We were very present with people and just, allowed ourselves to be accessible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think when I look back on that season, I'm like, man, we just went wherever the wind took us and loved whoever was in front of us.
It was so much fun. And that became like foundational for who we are today.
Yes.
Like how we view the whole entire world.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted people to be able to hear from you today, is just like that, incorporating that type of lifestyle, like practicing seeing. You see life as a great adventure. You were always challenging me. Like, Tori, let's do this. Let's do, like, even to this day, I'm like, I'm a mom. I work from home. You're like, me too. Let's go. Okay. Oh, but there's just such a beautiful way that you have let God build your lifestyle. And I think about how, what we do at Children's Cup, like, our whole heart is friendship. And in the past, not here, but like you've seen a lot of like, there's one person who's giving to be able to support and feed these kids, or like anytime you give, you feel like you're doing something wonderful, and you are, but we forget that like it's a reciprocal type of a thing. And so on paper, you've said it before, like a typical setup, someone new comes to church and the person who's been there forever has something to give, and that's that. But it was 100% a reciprocal.
Yes.
And that's where it became so full.
Yes.
And so beautiful.
Well, it was the change of perspectives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you needed my perspective and I needed yours. And the same is true, with Children's Cup. Like we need the perspective of people across the ocean, and they need our perspective.
Yeah. Like they can I can't tell you how many times like a kid has prayed over my life, or we've just had a conversation like, wow, I needed to hear that. I needed you in my life.
Yes.
And you have to like get outside of, you have to allow yourself to be in need, which is weird.
That's a vulnerability.
You feel like a burden.
Yes.
If you allow yourself to be in need. But in fact, it's like the greatest gift.
Wow. Because then you're ready to receive from someone else.
Yeah. And you taught me that too. Like we can depend on each other.
Yes.
Oh man.
It requires trust though.
It does.
Yeah.
Major. It's scary. I still struggle with like, hey, can you pray for me?
Yeah. To be in need. I mean, that's a challenge, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think whenever we view life from that perspective of we all need each other, then it makes it easier to say, I need someone else.
Yeah.
I need others.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so cool. So like, because you found salvation in adulthood, I feel like you just let God handcraft the philosophies that you live by, the lifestyle. And now, so take me on a journey, like from the time that we met till now, like you joined staff at the church and now you're like, just the adventures that he's taking
I'll say
on.
it this way. When I got saved, like I grew up in a religion that really didn't have the foundational principles of being in relationship with God.
Yeah.
So, you know, my relationship with God at that point was very formal and like non-existent.
Okay.
So when I got saved, it was like, wait, God is with, like, he's like right here with me, and like I don't have to be alone anymore.
Wow.
You know, that was a very real piece of information for me. And so,
oh, wait, what sparked that? Like what sparked you actually coming to Jesus?
I had been, you know, in a bunch of toxic relationships, and that was kind of like my issue. Is like I just dated so many people, all the wrong people.
Yeah.
Got invested in relationships, you know, with people that I shouldn't have been with. You know, got my heart broken, you know, over and over, and so I just remember I was totally done with that life, like that rat race of trying to find my value in someone else. And I remember being on my apartment bedroom floor at LSU, and I was just like miserable, and it was like I was at the end of my rope. And so I remember I didn't really know how to pray. I just said, God, I just need strength.
Oh my God.
And that's all I said. And you know, the way that God picked me up that day and then kept me up after that, you know, was a miracle in my life. And so
that is amazing.
When I, you know, got to know you and how you had a relationship with God, and you know, we're doing this thing, I like took that on. Like I was like, no, God is with me every day. Like he was there then, and he's here now. And so, you know, I think, you know, my husband struggles with that whole idea of like finding the presence of God, and you know, is he there always, or is he not? And I think that was just something that I took literally, like, God, you are now here with me forever.
Yes, and you embodied that. It was like, I'm like Chris, I'm like your husband, like searching, like, did I have the right set? Is my heart posture right? Did I have something? I gotta find you.
Did I disappoint
Stephanie
him?
Gretzinger, where are you? Help. But you just like, that is how you live. You're like, he's here. He's here, and every single day, and every day, and it's just so, it's such an encouraging thing to be around that, because you're like, oh yeah, you are here. Okay, let's go.
Well, I feel like I've learned through that, the more that I invite him in every day, the more that I hear from him. You know what I mean?
It's that simple, huh?
It's that simple. And so, you know, that took me on a journey of faith, I guess. And so from that point on, my next chapter was, I was still a student at LSU. I feel like my faith was so childlike at that point. I was a student at LSU, and I heard about Healing Place School of Ministry, and I had been drawn to the church. I was freshly saved. And so I knew, oh man, that's something that I want to be a part of. But I was in school. And so I'll never forget my prayer. My prayer at this point was, God, please make whichever like route I'm not supposed to take ugly.
Oh, wow.
And so I just remember being at LSU, and I started just becoming miserable in all of the classes I was in.
Oh
I started like
fail. Such a good prayer.
It's all I was like, well, I don't know how to know, what direction to go. But what I do know is if you tell me, you make it ugly, then I know that's not the right way.
I love that. I never heard this part of your story.
You haven't? Wow.
No,
so I'll never forget how awful that semester at LSU was. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore.
What were you studying?
Graphic design.
Okay.
Yes. And so
I'm supposed to be your good friend. I don't know.
I'm sorry. I think I have a cold. My nose is running. Anyway, so I ended up going into Healing Place School of Ministry that fall, and that's where I really started to go deeper in my relationship with God.
Wow.
And that's where Chris and I got together. Chris came in from a similar radical lifestyle. God had set him free from a life of addiction and just all kinds of stuff. And so we both were like, God is crazy. This is awesome. And, that's what we had in common. And so I believe that's why we ended up together, was because we had that same vision of who God was. Yeah. And so ever since, that's been our life. We were very, spontaneous as a couple, as a family, very willing to let God tell us to do something crazy and do it. But again, I think that comes from where God had brought us each individually. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you have seen God do something miraculous in your life, it is so hard to ignore him in other moments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're like, I have no questions at all. I laugh because...
Yes, sir.
I laugh because my husband Josh had the three of y'all. It was Chris, Allison, and Josh, and y'all were all radically saved. And Josh, I will still ask him, so tell me about your heart for Jesus. What is he? He's like, what? He's like, I don't talk that lingo, but okay. But he still is like, I remember the moment where God showed up in my darkness and said, if you don't, I want you to change your life. And if not, it's going to end bad. And he started seeing... He saw Jesus in the clouds and all these things. But to this day, you would think that God said that yesterday. He experienced that yesterday because it is just so real and fresh to him.
You can't forget.
And I'm like, dude, I hold on. I treasure the three of y'all so much because I'm like, man, y'all just bring it. You bring it to life. So it's
you didn't judge us, and we had a lot to be judged about.
That's what's so cool, because we're so different that it made us appreciate each other so much.
Yes.
So I really think that, I may have mentioned this, but I think that God designed it to where, Mother Teresa is always like, every person is Jesus in disguise. And you've got the least of these concept. And I really think he designed it to where each and every one of us represent a facet of him that no one else can.
Yes.
And we're all deficient and least in our own way. And the only way for us to truly, fully get to experience who he is through each person's story. Complete salvation is when every single person has a representation in his nature.
That is so good.
And that's why it's like fireworks.
Yeah.
So get curious about people's stories.
Yeah. Let people in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've been down this road for 14 years now, something like that. I can't do math. But you're still living on this radical childlike faith, wonder, obedience.
Yes.
So your latest venture was starting a podcast on a whim, which again, plug, tough stuff.
It wasn't
so good.
It wasn't quite a whim. It seemed like a whim because it was this buildup where I felt like, okay, let me just start over. Last fall, I listened to a podcast and it was somebody telling their story of what God had done in their life. And it was I've not ever cried that hard on a podcast.
Oh, is that the one you sent me?
Yes.
Oh, that's so
yes.
good.
And it was I felt like God quickened me like to do that, to tell stories or to host people telling their stories of hard things. And so I sat on it for the longest time because I don't know anything about a podcast. Like I am like, and honestly, I'm not a researcher either. Like I'm kind of like,
me neither. I feel so much better that you said that.
Yeah. Okay. It's like God told me to, or gave me this impression, like do this. And I was like, okay. And then I didn't, like, I just left it there. And so, finally by the beginning of the year, we kind of stepped out and did it. And so it's been really awesome. But like after school of ministry, I did different jobs and then eventually started working for Healing Place. And so, I have done things like graphic design and photography and website stuff and all this. And so that's been like the last 7 years of my life. It's just this routine, I worked on the website. I helped them develop the app. I did all of this techie stuff. Well, and meanwhile, in the back of my mind, I love people and had been, asking God, okay, like, where is the ministry side of being with people that I, know that I adore.
Yeah.
And, but I was faithful in that season. And so about July, I felt like God told me to make room. I was like, make room for what? And so I at the time, my greatest mentor, Miss Alice Cole, she's amazing. She was starting a new venture. And so, the only reason I am even able to function in society today is because of her. She's counseled me. She's amazing. And so she was starting a new venture and I felt like God said, make room for her.
Wow.
And so I went to leadership at our church and I said, hey, this is fresh. I know I've been here for 7 years, but God is saying make room for Miss Alice and her new organization. But I don't feel like I'm supposed to leave. I just was like, I don't know what this means. I just said I have to make room. And so it ended up working out perfectly where, they changed the way that I still do some responsibilities for the church, but there was some freedom that they were able to give me. And so that's where I started working with her, and she created this amazing organization called the Sparrow Foundation, where she, provides services to victims of human trafficking. And she's really like an expert in that field. And so I made room for that, and I found myself in the most unlikely places and spaces at the state capitol, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
I know you sent me pictures. You're all dressed up in court clothes. I'm
just like
doing?
Sitting across the table from a survivor who had been through the most horrific, unimaginable situation. And so it was one of those things where all God told me was to make room, and I just started trying to make room, and He's begun to fill it. Then after I started helping with them, then the podcast came. And so I look at my week now, and I'm like, what am I doing? Now I'm editing a podcast all week. Wow. I am helping human trafficking survivors. And, it's just my life is just vastly different than it was last year. But, I had to obey God. I love Healing Place. I loved working at the church. There was literally nothing wrong with my season when I was there. In fact, Chris still works there. We loved it. It was just, I had to obey God. And so cool. It's cool because I'm still connected and still doing stuff for them. But then also literally feel like God has me on this adventure where I don't know, some days I don't know what's going to happen.
Wow.
And I'm just like, okay, God, what's today?
Oh, so good. It's what is it? The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by
night? That's how it feels. Sometimes Chris is like, what are you doing today? And I'm like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. And at the end of the day, I'm like, you won't believe what we did today.
It's so you. It's so Allison.
Yeah.
But it's so cool because when you say, I put myself in your shoes, like when you told me that back in the summer, like make room, I felt like nervous. I was like, not nervous. Like I knew it was going to be fine. Like you're doing the right thing. But putting myself in your shoes, making room without knowing how I'm going to fill that room is terrifying.
Well, not only practically, but financially. Yeah. Right. So like I because I had to make room, my position at the church shifted. And so I took a pay cut.
Wow.
And so, and I began to help this organization get off the ground, which means funding. There still isn't funding.
Wow.
Like, I mean, there is, but it's not enough to, start providing salaries for everybody. And so it's like I'm in this place where I'm like, God, I don't even know how you're going to pay our bills sometimes, but he does,
Yeah.
And it's like, even though there are things about this season that are unpredictable, and we're not like broke. Yeah, like I said that, and it was like, maybe people are going to feel sorry for us. Donations? I'm just kidding. Send us money. No, our finances are just we don't have that regular set check every 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Yeah. God's just doing what God does, and even though it's unpredictable, it's literally the most fun adventure to me.
It's amazing
because it's like a surprise every day.
Awesome. Yeah. I love the confidence that you live by with, like, Chris and I laughed the other day because you just like hear a word from God and you're like, that's decided. Like, I heard it and I'm doing it.
Yes.
And like our personalities are like, okay, he said this. Did he mean that? What do I like? Do I need to?
I'm like, no, God said to make room. I'm like, gotta quit my job. And Chris is like, what?
Let's think through all the details. And you're like, no, God said, and the details follow. And it's just so inspiring to be around someone who reminds you and like brings you back to not the reality of the world, but the reality of the kingdom. Yes. And it's like, this is how we arrange our lives.
Well, I think about Abraham.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't have all the details.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's like, I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I have a reverence for God.
Yeah.
To where if he, like, I'm scared to, like, I've been so tempted to go back and like, let me maybe ask them if I can get my job back. Oh, no. Or like, because it is scary, but I ultimately feel like I fear God. Like, I'm like, I don't want to, I want to obey God.
Yeah.
And honestly, if God asks me to do something, isn't he in charge?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like, we talked about this the other day too. You and Chris are both so black and white, and I am like fluidly in the gray. I'm like, God said it would be, it would be fine. And so I'm just,
There's so much peace in that.
Yeah.
There's so much peace. I think I, and Chris too, probably will just, the position for me sometimes is like, what am I bringing to God?
Yes.
Like, okay, I have to do these acts of kindness, and don't get me wrong, like, I think he invites me on those, but when my perspective is wrong, I think that I'm doing this as an offering to him, which can be acceptable and beautiful. But when I flip it and be like, I remember how you like have shown me and exemplify, like, God is just giving you an invitation every single day.
Yes.
Like, either you take it or leave it, but it is not about what you're bringing to him. He turns it into gifts for him and glory. Yes. He turns it into jewels at his feet, but it's not you who's actually presenting all this stuff. And I just am so inspired by.
But we're all wired differently, though.
Of course.
And we all need each other's perspectives, like we said.
Yeah.
So don't knock on your...
No, but I love that it just challenges me to be like, oh, yeah, like, just embrace where he's at and follow that. It's so cool. Okay, so I just want to ask some details, though, about the traffic. Anti-trafficking is huge.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit more about, like, I know you can't go into super detail. But I feel like there's a lot of adventurous things that are happening, a lot of beautiful, important things.
Getting to work with Alice Cole.
Yeah.
She has been working with trafficking victims for 50 years.
That's insane. Like, we didn't even know what trafficking was 50 years ago.
Since before there was a term human trafficking. Her first victim was like a girl in her neighborhood on her porch.
Oh my.
That she talked with, and somebody brought to her because she needed her.
That's how it started.
Yes.
Whoa.
And so getting to watch, really, I feel like that's what I do, is I'm the note taker, right? So like it was like, God, I make room, and then I'm like, I'll do anything, like whatever you need me to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not like the best note taker either. Like I'm like, if you need me to take notes, I will take notes. Like I'll do my very best.
Obedient. What you said.
Yes, because our team, it's amazing. But
yeah,
we get to provide services to victims and help them get out of that lifestyle. And so we have a client list, and we're constantly, in communication with survivors. But then also we train, entities in our community that would intercept these victims, right? Wow. So like law enforcement, the court system, government, like
that's a big deal.
Yes, because these people are out in our society, and so they're going to interact with law enforcement, whoever, but our team gets to go in and train those people on what to look for and how to detect trafficking. And what's even cooler is we have a team of survivors on our team. So whenever we train people, it's from the vantage point of a human trafficking survivor. And so I've learned a lot just about how to help people that are going through really hard things. And also just really, I feel like I just stand in awe at what they're doing. I just take notes.
That's so cool. But that's awesome. And that's what has led you to so many incredible places and spaces and random parts of the world. The extravagant dimensions of God's love is because you start with that heart of awe and wonder, just wanting to learn. Yes. And I remember back when I first met you, the concept that you kept saying was, God is helping me unlearn so much. Yes. And you kept talking about like unraveling all of these things. And then he like reshaped how, and now you're just like intaking everything. Yes. It's so cool. But I love what you're doing now.
Well, thank you.
I love what I have to note though. This is so side note, but while you were talking about Miss Alice and how awesome she is, it hit me. I was like, she also grew up like I grew up, where she was like just church, love Jesus. Yes. But she's like casting out demons. She is traveling on mission. She is rescuing. Like
she is the person that you bring somebody who's really broken, because she will know what to do. Yeah. But one thing that's so amazing about her is that she allowed other people and their stories to mark her, and she listened. She was curious, like you were saying earlier, like she learns from people. Yeah. And she lets people that have been through hard things lead her in certain ways.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's true. Man. Yes. Oh my gosh. There's so much more that I wanted to ask you today, but maybe we'll have a sequel. I don't know. There's so much. Like, we have to talk about adoption. Yes. We talk about Selah. Yes. Traveling through infertility. Yes. Y'all's marriage. Yes. But also, if people go to the Tough Stuff podcast, they can hear all these things as well in your episodes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so for people who are our wonderful friends and listeners, give us some homework. Like, we are inspired by you and your story. What
I think the one book that marked me more than any other book, and I try to read it like once a year. Okay. Practice the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Yes. And it's a little tiny book.
Oh, I need to read that.
Yes. And, that book has shaped my relationship with God. And so, it's all about how he learned how to practice being in relationship with God in everyday life. He was a chef, I believe, and so he's like, I brought God with me into the kitchen. And so I think if people would really grab a hold of that concept of God really is with you, and like act like it, and he taught that book taught me how to do that.
I love it. That is a great book.
Yes.
I don't even know where you find it. Practice the Presence of God.
I think you can get it on Amazon.
Is it on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mine's like an ancient little.
I know. Me too.
So good.
By Brother Lawrence.
Brother Lawrence.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out today.
Thank you for
guys.
having me.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening in. We'll catch you next time on Friend to Friend.
Peace.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. We hope you loved it. If anything stuck out to you, drop a comment and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all the fun things. And if you're looking for us on social media, you can find us at Children's Cup.